Hobbits in the Hood? Man! Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other two books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Actor Anthony Mackie complained about the lack of diversity in the Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings franchises. Now, Anthony Mackie, who plays the Falcon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is upset that there are no black friends for Harry Potter, and he's also upset that there are no hobbits in the hood. And what Anthony Mackie really doesn't understand is that both of those franchises, Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, were originally created by white people. Harry Potter was created by J.K. Rowling, a white British woman, and was set in 1990 Scotland, and Lord of the Rings was created by J.R.R. Tolkien and was set in a Middle-earth, which was set in Europe. So it doesn't really make much sense to go out here and talk about so-called diversity as related to these two franchises, which are set in mostly white European areas, but Anthony Mackie believes that there should be black friends for Harry Potter, or there should be some hobbits in the hood. Now, what Anthony Mackie is complaining about really doesn't make sense until you understand the whole concept of being spellbound. Now, in my 2016 novel, Spellbound, I talk about the whole concept of being a spellbound black person, and a spellbound black person was someone who wants to fit into the black box that is acceptable to white people. Now, Anthony Mackie basically, I believe, wants to try to fit black people into a box that will be acceptable to white people as related to these two franchises. However, there is no way to organically fit black people into these two franchises, and the critical question I have to ask is, why would I even, as a black person, want to go out here and be fit into a franchise that I really was never originally designed to be a part of? Because what Anthony Mackie is proposing is, just as I see it, absolutely ridiculous to talk about trying to fit black characters into a world that they never were designed for, or the creators never intended them to be a part of. Now, in the case of Harry Potter, yes, they have put black characters in the background of the Harry Potter movies, but that really, again, is a major insult because most of those characters are basically tokens who fit or in the background and really don't have a significant part to contribute to the story. Now, in the case of Lord of the Rings, there's no real possible way to fit them in, but Amazon tried to do this with its Rings of Power franchise and failed miserably. And it failed miserably because most of the audience vehemently rejected all of the so-called hobbits in the hood because they were never a part of Tolkien's original story. Now, again, the problem isn't these franchises. The problem is the frame of thinking that Anthony Mackie has. And I've talked in depth about this in a previous video where I talked about how many black people want to see black characters only in worlds that feature prominently white characters and don't really want to be a part of a world that features black characters all by themselves. And this is something that Anthony Mackie has gained a mindset from as related to being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And because he was a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where he was primarily validated by white people for playing the role of Falcon, the Captain America's sidekick, and later going on to graduate to becoming the Captain America of the MCU, who wears his own hand-me-down version of Steve Rogers' costume. He wants to be a part of a white fantasy world instead of going out here and trying to take things to the next level by advocating for a world filled with black characters and having black characters in the lead in their own world. That is the way we should be focusing on fantasy, because in Japan, when they do manga, they focus mostly on making Japanese characters. When they are making European comics, they focus mostly on making European fantasy characters. And here in America, when they create fantasy franchises, they focus mostly on making white characters. So black actors and black creators need to be focusing on making a world where we see ourselves first, because our perception of self is the main problem, as related to Anthony Mackie's complaint. And the way we see ourselves is that we see ourselves as part of a white world instead of seeing ourselves in our own world. And when you have a perception where you only see yourself in the background of a white person's world, that's a really messed up perception, because you see yourself in the background of somebody's world, and you see yourself as an ancillary character in somebody else's universe. Now, this is something we have been mentally conditioned to see ourselves as ever since the days of Lando Calrissian in 1980's Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. And sadly, many black people really can't go out here and have the mindset to see ourselves as the center focus of our own world, the same way Wesley Snipes saw himself as the center of his own world in 1998's Blade. Now, if you look at Empire Strikes Back, Lando is just in the back of the movie, towards the end of the movie, in the third act. But if you look at Blade, Blade is at the center of the entire movie. He is the main focus of that movie, and that is the perception I would think Anthony Mackie should have had, but sadly he's still stuck in the Spellbound mindset, still trying to fit a black person into a box that will be acceptable to white people in a white fantasy world. And we can't have that frame of thinking if we want to move forward as related to black characters in fantasy and science fiction. No, in order for us to move ahead as related to the perception of ourselves in fantasy and science fiction, we have to start having a mindset to see ourselves as the center of our world, and we also have to see ourselves as the center of our world, because we need to have our stories told, not have a story about hobbits in the hood. No, we need to have a story told about the black experience from a fantasy perspective. And that's what I do over at SJS Direct. I tell stories from a fantasy perspective, from the black experience, and I talk about fantasy from the perspective of black culture, and give people a picture of black life where we get to see black people front and center. That's what I do when I'm writing vampire novels like Eternal Night, or fantasy novels like the Isis series, the Esteem series, and the John Haynes series. I go out here and I present supernatural fantasy from a black perspective, and I make black culture and black people the center focus, so that black children can see a world where they are the lead characters, and they can see their culture being presented in a positive light, and get to see black people out here having those fantastic adventures that many of the white characters go out here and have. And I wanted to show that picture of the world, because that perception gives black children and black people a positive perspective of themselves, and it also allows black men and women and children to imagine themselves in a world where they are in the foreground, front and center, and they are in a world where they are their own unique characters, and they're not just some token character in the background of some white person's world, or there's some character who's wearing a hand-me-down costume, the same way Anthony Mackie wears a hand-me-down costume when he's playing the role of Captain America in shows like Falcon and Winter Soldier towards the end of the series, or in the new Captain America movie that's coming up, Captain America Brave New World, or whatever it's called. I don't want people to see my characters as some token or some hand-me-down. No, I want them to be seen as unique characters with their own personality and their own voice. And that's the response I've been getting from readers of books like Eternal Night, books like the ISIS series, books like the Esteem series, books like the John Haynes series. When people read one of my SJS Direct books, they oftentimes tell me that they see these characters as having their own unique personalities, having their own unique voices, and having their own stories, and that changes people's perception of black characters when people experience an SJS Direct imprint book. When they experience an SJS Direct imprint book, what they do is they see a world of black people, and they see a world where many black children, I've had readers tell me this, their kids imagine themselves as being the center of that world. And again, this is the kind of perception you would think Anthony Mackie would be advocating for. Unfortunately, he shows me how he's so spellbound he is, because he's sitting here still talking about hobbits in the hood and Harry Potter having a black friend. Well, writers like J.K. Rowling and J.R.R. Tolkien aren't going to give you a black character in those worlds because they've never experienced black people the way another black writer like myself has, and because they have never experienced black people like the way I have living in areas like the South Bronx. They can't really tell you about the diversity of different thoughts in the black community. They can't really give you a richer, diverse picture of black life the way I have in many of my books, like I've done again in not only the ISIS, Esteem, and John Haynes series. I mean, I've featured black people from all different aspects of life outside of the hood. I've featured books that feature black girls from Beverly Hills, like in my All About Nikki book. I've featured stories about black actresses in All About Marilyn. I've featured black goths in the Spinsterella trilogy, and I've also featured black sorority girls in my novel The Thetas, and a story about two black-owned businesses in A Recipe for Success. So I know that there is more diversity of thought as related to black people, and that's something Anthony Mackie really wasn't thinking about when he made the very ignorant statement stating that, oh, I want to see some hobbits in the hood and Harry Potter have some black friends. No, I don't want to see black characters shoehorned into a story where they don't fit, or see black characters just being thrown in the background so that a studio can passively promote diversity, but aggressively go out here and promote racism. No, I want to see original, unique black stories like I produce on the SJS Direct imprint, with black characters being the lead in their own stories and talking about our experiences. And I don't want to see anything like Black Panther, because I know a lot of these fantasy fans and black nerds will sit there and say, oh, Black Panther was that kind of movie because Ryan Coogler directed it. But that's not really, again, our story. No, that was a story created by white people like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and that was their view of how they saw black people. The same way the Falcon was their view of black people. He was Steve Rogers' friend, and he was a hero, but he never really was as rich and multidimensional as what Cheo Coker put on Marvel Comics' Luke Cage. And again, there's a difference between a story designed and written by a black creator and a story by a white guy who's giving us his view of black, or some black bootleg's view of black, which is meant to appease white people. No, when you get a black creator like myself who goes out here and creates a black world of black characters, you get a fresh perspective, you get unique takes on black people, you get unique takes on black life, you get a richer picture of the black experience, and that's something Anthony Mackie doesn't really see as related to the about black characters, and it's a shame because if he knew about what black writers like myself do, he would be seeing that the stories that we tell are a lot richer as related to so-called diversity, because we're not just about so-called representation of just having a black face there. No, we are about giving you that diversity of thought and showing you a richer picture of black people. And that's what I imagine when I go out here and I put fingers to the keyboard for stories that were inspired by Anthony Mackie, like the upcoming 2024 book, Isis Dark Incubus. Now, when I was writing Isis Dark Incubus, I was inspired by Anthony Mackie to write the bad guy, Keith, the Incubus, for that story. And I wasn't inspired to go out here and make a knockoff of Falcon or hand-me-down Captain America. No, when I saw Anthony Mackie's acting, I imagined him playing an incubus who goes out here and is giving Isis a major run for her money in that story, because I wanted to see a deeper range as related to Anthony Mackie's acting, and I envisioned Anthony Mackie playing a bad guy, because bad guys oftentimes are the role that are the breakout for an actor and leads to them having a longer career, because the performance is so strong that in some cases it becomes their signature role. Now, when I envisioned Anthony Mackie as an incubus, I imagined him to be iconic, similar to the way Kurtwood Smith was as Clarence Boddicker or Ronnie Cox was as Dick Jones. And I saw him as a bad guy because I thought this would give him more depth and layers, and it would be a good character to really show his skill set. I mean, when I go out here and I imagine an actor in a role, I want to give them something that has some meat and substance. And that's what I was doing when I was putting fingers to the keyboard for the Incubus character in Isis Dark Incubus, because I think that black actors could go out here and do more with a character if they can add the right kind of stories. And that's the thing that really, again, irks me about Anthony Mackie talking about the lack of diversity in Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. He doesn't see how there are black creators out here who want to go out here and craft stories with him and want to go out here and show him a richer picture of black culture and the black experience, and how these characters are far richer and more multidimensional and can connect and resonate with readers and audiences, because they see a person and not some background character who is black. No, they see a whole complete person, and because they see a whole complete person with their own story arc and see their character completely, fully being developed, they get to know a unique individual, not just, hey, it's a black guy in the background, or hey, it's a black guy who's the sidekick, or it's the black guy who's the bumbling, stumbling clown, like Finn in Star Wars. No, we get to see a full character, and that's one of the things that inspired me to write Isis Dark Incubus this year. And again, when I was writing the story, I just imagined Anthony Mackie playing Keith the Incubus and being this villain who basically gives Isis a major run for her money in the third story arc that I'm starting. Now, Anthony Mackie sadly doesn't imagine himself as being a part of a black world, only being a part of a white one. Now, I have a critical question I want to ask Anthony Mackie. Would he rather be a background character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Captain America's sidekick and hand-me-down successor, or would he rather be a lead villain in the SJS Direct universe? And the reason why I posed that question to Anthony Mackie is because his answer will say a lot about his perception of self. Because would you rather just be a background character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe who really has no major role in it and no major part in it, and be this character who's going to be a part as a hand-me-down character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and not really be seen as anything significant? Or would you rather play a villain in the SJS Direct universe and be seen as somebody who is important and a part of a major story? I mean, that's the difference between being in a white world of fantasy characters like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or a world of black characters like the SJS Direct Universe. Yes, the MCU is more popular than the SJS Direct Universe, but the opportunity offered in the SJS Direct Universe is one where you get to be seen in a lead role. You get to be seen as a character who is a prime antagonist, and you get to be able to show your range. And again, that is the difference between being in a black fantasy project and a white fantasy project, because when actors like Anthony Mackie sit here and complain about the lack of diversity in white franchises, it's coming from a position of weakness, and it's coming from a position of begging for white acceptance instead of us learning how to value ourselves. And us learning to value ourselves shows that we see value in self, we see potential and greatness in self, and it shows our children that instead of us seeking the approval of white people or trying to fit ourselves into boxes in black and white people's worlds, we go out here and create our own worlds and tell our own stories, and we tell stories from our own experiences. That, to me, it has a greater impact on our children, and it inspires our children to start seeing themselves as being people who are beautiful and wonderful. And again, we start seeing the content of our character and not seeing ourselves as just the color of our skin, and us seeing ourselves as something greater than being in the background of some white person's world as a bumbling, stumbling janitor like Finn, or a background asexualized character like Falcon and War Machine were, where these two characters come into the story just being the friend of a Steve Rogers or a Tony Stark, but never have any love interest of their own, never have any real lives of their own, and are just there to just encourage the white hero to go live their life, but never have a life of their own. That's a problem I've seen with many of the black characters that I've read in many comics and on many TV shows. They really just put the black character in the background of the white character's world, where they're basically just, again, asexualized, and they're turned into these just guys who are just there to just rally for the other white characters. And again, that's not representation, that's tokenization. And as a black writer of fantasy, I know I can do better when I write my stories. And if I can do better, then we can do better as related to things. And I would think Anthony Mackie would want to advocate for better stories, but instead he complains about the lack of diversity in Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Well, I could care less about Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. I'm more concerned about making Isis John Haynes esteem and books like Eternal Night the books that black people go out here and buy, so that we can see ourselves in these kinds of stories, and I imagine ourselves in a world that of our own. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy on the SJS Direct imprint, like the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and my vampire novel Eternal Night, and my goth Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Walmart, and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos about fantasy and science fiction from a black perspective, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to check out my comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that on lulu.com and pick yourself up a paper copy. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.